All right, everyone, we are up and running today. This is Marvin Pendarvis. He is running in the June primary for District Seat 113. That's for the House. He is our incumbent. He is with the Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester area. So, Mr. Pendarvis, how would you like to describe your platform, and what can you tell us about yourself this evening?
Well, first off, Lisa, just want to thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be able to be on and talk with you and so many of the people within your organization. I'm very fond of the work that you all have done over the last couple of years and how you've been able to highlight important issues within education. A little bit about what I've done, and I got elected in 2017. And let me know if you can't hear me well. I know there's a little wind outside, but just kind of let me know. But I got elected in 2017, and I ran on a platform really that was about bringing to light issues that were important to people. I polled the district. I talked with day-to-day people, as I would call them, salt of the earth people, about things that were near and dear to them. And I have a district that, in many respects, especially in North Charleston, is very low income, is very minority, and has a struggling economy. And so when I talk with people, they want to be able to have access to quality jobs. They want better affordable housing and being able to have a roof over their head. They want better education because they realize that the schools have been continuing to deprive them of the quality education that their children deserve. And so most of my platform, if you look at every piece of legislation that I filed, that I've been a co-sponsor on, all the issues that I've continued to highlight, it's been based off of those core principles, and that's about bringing issues that are important to the people to the forefront, because it's the people that we must represent, and anything that I can do to build upon the foundation that's going to allow people to have the successful life that they deserve, not only themselves but for their children, and to transform the communities that we live in, then I support. So that's really what I've been about since I've been elected.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, what is your opinion on the state of public education in South Carolina, both now and before the pandemic? What do you think is going on with our education system here in South Carolina? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've been on a record of saying this, but I believe the pandemic has only brought to light issues that we've far and long neglected in South Carolina, and education being one of them. I've always been of the opinion that South Carolina's education system has lagged behind other states for a variety of reasons, but chief among them is that we've not funded it properly. When I got elected, I ran on a platform of one of the tenets of my platform for education was about trying to reform and repeal Act 388, the education funding formula. I spoke with a number of teachers, and we had conversations about the impact that that was having across education. And so South Carolina has not done a good job of one, telling children and preparing children for success after they get out of the 12th grade, whether that be them going to pursue some college degree, whether they're going into a technical college, or whether they enter into the workforce immediately. We haven't done a good job of that. And so a lot of that has to do with funding. A lot of that has to do with prioritization when it comes to how we deal with education. Obviously, part of the funding pieces goes towards supporting teachers and one, paying them what they need and deserve, but also providing them the kind of resources in the classroom that they need. I grew up in my family. We all went through the public school system here in Charleston County. From K through 12, I was educated through the public school system. And so I know the success that can come out of a public school here in South Carolina. But we have to show a commitment as a state that we're ready to champion the people that are in these schools, to bring them along, to show them that we care about them, to invest in them properly. And we just haven't done that in South Carolina. I've been continuing to be vocal about those issues as a member of the General Assembly, and hoping that we bring the conversation along about what we need to do to improve education, because it's a very nuanced issue. There's certainly no one solution that's going to address it all. But what we can do is fundamentally address it in a way that's going to bring children into the 21st century, educating them like this is the 21st century, continue, getting rid of these antiquated methods, but bringing us along when it comes to how we value education, how we view it, and ultimately our philosophy and what's best for children. And so I've noticed it. I haven't been pleased with what I've seen. We've certainly made some strides. I commend the superintendent of education and some of the things that she's done. I know that when we dealt with the education reform bill in the last session, there were some things that I liked, but there were some things that I didn't like. And we have to be able to understand, one, be responsive to the needs and the concerns of teachers, to be responsive to the communities in which these schools operate within. I look at education as almost wraparound in a way. So many of these children face issues outside of the classroom, that it takes more than just your day to day instructional time to get through. And so, how are we dealing with the unique set of circumstances that enter into the doors at 8 o'clock in the school day, when these teachers have to deal with kids who may be going through trauma or hell within their own households before they come into the schools? So we have an obligation to do more. I've been pleased with what we've seen, but we certainly have a long way to go.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you champion for educators as well as our students, because as you know, the children of South Carolina is what's going to make South Carolina grow and prosper. And we've got such a wonderful, beautiful state, and our people are wonderful and beautiful people. And so we just need to grow these children up to prosper further in life. And I
Absolutely.
appreciate you champion for our kids that way. So if you
Absolutely.
are able to keep your seat, which we hope you do, I'm sure, what steps would you take to improve public education? Like, what would you see as maybe your next step to try to helping education to be better here in South Carolina?
Well, absolutely. So for me, it comes with investment, and it comes not only an investment of our dollars, but an investment in our prioritization. And so what I mean by that is, and I'll give you an example of what I saw here in South Carolina as just a microcosm of what I believe is an issue across the entire state, or in here in Charleston is a microcosm of an issue across the state. What I would one fund education properly. There's always a discussion about what the base student cost, and how much are we putting toward that. We are always talking about, so one, we need to properly and fully fund it. Two, we need to continuing to improve and bring teacher salaries along, not only at the southeastern average but beyond that. We so that's that, because I always view that you can tell what a man prioritizes about where he spends his money. And so we just haven't done that in education. Um, so I would be having those conversations, and also investing in a lot of our the public school system. I am a champion for public schools. I recognize parents have the option, and sometimes some of them feel like they have the obligation to send their kids wherever they want to. And I respect that choice. I understand it. I get it, but I am a champion of public schools, because I recognize I was a public school person. You know, my mom couldn't afford to send me to a private school. We didn't live in areas where we had the luxury to go to any kind of magnet school for elementary and middle school. We need good public schools. We need to be able to support public schools with the kind of support that they need. So, an example, so that's what I would do. I would continue to look at models. There's an example here in Charleston, Meeting Street Academy, that has been the center of a lot of debate here locally, simply because they have a model that a lot of people like. And my challenge to the school district was this: I told the superintendent and then the members of the board, what Meeting Street is doing is good, right? You have two teachers in a classroom. They have um, mental health and basically services to be able to provide students in the school. They have an extended day program where you're able to deal with kids who may not be able to, parents may be working two jobs and aren't able to get them from school. I said, these are things that, why can't we? I said, this is a good model. Why can't we adopt this in our public schools? Why can't we look at some of the good successes? And so I would look at how do we fund and put money and pour into our school to be able to be innovative in a way that's going to really bring our public schools along, and ensure that if a parent lives in this particular area, they don't have to look at the schools in different areas, or what's the best charter school or private school, because they know they've got quality public school that's there. But we haven't invested in, and that's not only done in Charleston, but that's across the entire state of South Carolina. And so I would be continuing to focus on that. What I would do immediately, if and when I'm reelected, is um, have a conversation, especially in this post pandemic world, about how we use some of our money. So we'll be going back to Columbia in January, not January, I'm sorry, in June potentially, and we'll be going back in September to deal with the budget, which we were unable to pass. And a lot of the money that came down from the CARES Act went straight to the state superintendent's office, and they're looking at using a lot of that money to help teachers be able to get back into the classroom in August. And what do I mean? So why do I say that? And what is my point of bringing that up? Well, we need to be able to look at how we're able to fund different parts of education. If there's an opportunity for us to really get it right, if there's an opportunity to make amends for some of the neglect that we've had toward education, we can do it now. Remember what I said at the outset. This pandemic has exposed so many of the things that we've ignored for a long time, education being one of them. And so we have an opportunity to do it when we get back. So I would immediately start taking action on that, but also revisit it next year and tell my colleagues when we get back in January 2021, we saw what happened last year. We saw what the pandemic did to us. We saw how it exposed some of our deficiencies in education. We can get it right. Let's not be reactive. Let's be proactive and start passing some meaningful legislation. Let's invest in it properly. Let's, take out so many of the, let's make teachers' lives easier. Let's support them in the classroom. And let's do everything that we can so that you can get a quality public education in South Carolina, and we'll be preparing our students for success in whatever they want to do.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. So other than issues surrounding funding, is there any other top issue that you see within public education other than funding?
Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of it it goes back to um, the classroom. And so one of the challenges that I've seen, so I guess there are three issues. One, class sizes has always been an issue, and one that I continue to see. And I separate these issues because it's related. And when I look and go into some of these schools, what I've seen is, from an infrastructure standpoint, some of our schools just aren't there. And we haven't done a good job of really putting some of our schools and equipping them substantially. And also another issue that I see in education is the curriculum in a lot of ways. Um, and a lot of this came to light when we were having conversations over the last 2 years and dealing with the large omnibus education bill. But so many things that I hear from teachers are what's the standards that are coming down from the State Department for what's supposed to be taught in the classroom, and ultimately how it's supposed to be taught. So much of it is restrictive. Some of it, is very unclear. A lot of teachers feel like things are unnecessary. We certainly, I know teachers were happy that were able to get some kind of relief when it came to the social studies standards. But there's a lot more that I'm hearing from teachers about what needs to be done in the classroom. So if there's an issue outside of funding, it would be within the classroom, one from the actual infrastructure, the building that many of these schools are in, but additionally, what we see in the classroom as far as the curriculum and class sizes.
Yes, sir. And I know a lot of that has to do with being able to keep as many teachers as we can, because class size is ultimately affected by how many teachers we have in South Carolina and how many that we can obtain.
Yes, yep.
Well, I know one of our major goals, despite the feeling of some people in South Carolina, one of the major goals of SC for ED is that we get well-trained, highly qualified educators in every single classroom, because every single child in the state of South Carolina that is going through our public education system has the right to a free and appropriate education. And so we want those great teachers to be in the classroom, and we want to keep them there. We don't want to keep losing so many of our great teachers.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that will ultimately really help with the class size issue that you bring up, which is a big issue. It really is. So with state testing, I know state testing has to happen. It's got to happen at some point. But the fact that the pandemic set aside some of the state testing and canceled some of the state testing, what do you feel about these types of accountability measures today, considering so many of our children are still able to learn and so many of our teachers are still able to teach without the fear of a state test being over
Well,
their
I'll be honest, Lisa. I've never been a fan of so many of the tests that we issue and administer within our schools. I wasn't a fan when I was in school, and I certainly haven't been a fan now that I've been in the adult world, especially as a legislator. So much of it goes, and well, I guess it's a couple for one. It goes back to my fundamental belief in how many of the standardized tests that are given, not only in all realms of education. You know, I went to law school. There's a standardized test that you have to go through to get into law school, to graduate and be a lawyer, and so many of it, and there's studies that go about the cultural bias that that's within so many of these tests. It hurts many children in rural communities that haven't been exposed, and naturally aren't able to perform well on so many of these tests. And so I haven't been a fan for that. But also because what this pandemic has shown us again, if we're still able to teach a lot of these students in different ways, in unique ways, what impact are these tests having? What is the purpose of it? I get it, right? Everyone loves numbers. We love data. We love metrics. We as a society, especially in education, there's this desire to measure us in some way, in shape, or form. And so we have to pit students against others to figure out exactly who's where and who needs to go. I guess we've deemed it the best way to categorize students, and to show who's ready to go to the next level or go into this place. But I guess I would push back on that notion in many respects, because I believe that if we do a good job of continuing to promote and support students throughout the calendar year, that when we get to the end of the year, you won't need to do that. And again, there's a fear of over testing as well, right? How many standardized tests is good? When is it enough? When is it too much? I again, as someone who grew up in an area that I could tell you, there were people who went different routes than me. Very challenging neighborhood. Went through a public school system. Didn't always perform well on standardized tests, but always achieved well academically. And so, just knowing that it wasn't always the best measure of success of a student, and we have to figure out alternate ways to measure that. And so, I hope that reunites the conversation around it, because you know it's something that I've long held some beliefs toward, and I hope that we can try to um, reform that in some way.
Forgive me if my dog starts to bark. He's
Oh, yes, ma'am.
as a high school science teacher, one of the things that frustrates me about this testing is, as you said, data. I'm all for data. I'm driven by data as a science major. But as a science teacher in the state of South Carolina, one of the most frustrating things about high school end of course testing is they'll tell you how horrible you've done. For example, you had 40% of your students failed this year on the biology exam, but we can't tell you why they failed. We can't tell you where you failed as a teacher. It's like, so did they mess up on mitosis and I need to do better at teaching in that? Well, we can't tell you that. And so that's so frustrating. It's like, okay, you're going to compare the students from Chapin to Charleston to Lexington to Lawrence to Greenville, and we're all supposed to be comparing to each other, but you can't tell me as a teacher how to grow and improve. And so that's
Right.
very frustrating. As is a normal industry worker, any other job, they would tell you, this is where you're struggling as an employee, and if you can't measure up in this area, we're going to have to let you go. But they don't say that to us as educators. They say, this is how it is. you're not doing good in this, but we can't tell you how or why. You're just going to have to guess.
Right.
And so that's very frustrating. And one of the other candidates that I spoke with this evening for the Greenville area, he made a really good point too. South Carolina has always been at the bottom of the list statistically in education. But when you compare our state, our standards, our accountability measures, our standards for our children are way high compared to a lot of our surrounding states. Florida's passing rate for their MAP and PASS exams are much lower than South Carolina. California doesn't require as much for their students to graduate high school as South Carolina does. And yet we get this awful stigma of South Carolina being one of the bottom states in education, but yet we require more of our students than many of the other states in the U.S. And so it's very frustrating for all of this to come out and to make us look so negative when really we have some bright kids that live in this state that really need to be propped up and to feel like they are accomplishing something. And I think those numbers do not do our children justice at all.
Good point.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to say regarding education? Otherwise, I'm good with my questions this evening.
Well, no, that's not. You've been very thorough, and so I just appreciate everything that you and everyone within SC for Ed is doing, and I just thank you for having me on this evening.
Well, thank you so much for interviewing with us. And again, for those of you who are watching, this is our incumbent for seat 113 for the Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester area. This is Marvin Pendarvis. He is going to be running in the primary against Ms. Holmes. And so we wish you the best of luck, Mr. Pendarvis, and we look forward to the great work that you plan to do in education.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.